Armin Blackwright is an overconfident ranger who one day hit his head so hard trying to show off he traveled somewhere different, and along the way made a new friend, a small little drake who he named Baz. Now he has to take care of this creature lost in a new place and get it home. In this video, I'll be going over how to build and play Armin in most tabletop role-playing games, but more specifically, D&D. Our topics will be as follows: personality, class and race, ability scores, proficiencies and feats, and gear. As always, Armin and his story can be played a lot of different ways. You can choose to have him follow any sort of path once he wakes up beside his new friend. These are merely my suggestions and how I originally envisioned the character. Feel free to adapt and overcome how you see fit. Part 1. Personality. Armin is first and foremost a showboat. He thinks he is the best, and that is what has always and will always get him into trouble. When challenged on who's the best at a certain skill, he is always quick to get competitive, but anytime he loses, there is always a very good reason why. Maybe his arm is sore from the day before his workout, or maybe the sun was in his eyes. No matter what, losing is never his fault. When Armin met his pal Baz, it was in a scenario where both of them were terrified for their lives and sure that they were gonna die. Armin having quote-unquote saved Baz, Baz does not want to leave Armin's side under almost any circumstances. Baz is in an unfamiliar area where he is not sure what to do. Where Armin goes, Baz goes, and if Baz is left alone, maybe outside a tavern, he gets easily startled and is very anxious. Armin enjoys having Baz because he's a really cool companion, but sometimes he really does wish he had a little more alone time. Unfortunately, that's a wish Baz will never grant. One thing that Armin and Baz both really enjoy are sweets. Both Armin and Baz are a sucker for any kind of pastry. Any sweet scent will carry them off their feet to the nearest bakery, just like Shaggy and Scooby. One thing they both really don't like are heights. Both of them nearly died falling off of a super tall tower, so they tend to keep their antics fairly close to the ground. Part 2. Class and race. Now it's time to look at Armin's class and race. To start off, let's discuss class. Armin is first and foremost a ranger. Rangers, as described by the player's handbook, are warriors of the wilderness, good at hunting and tracking. These are the skills that Armin's training has given him. He knows how to stalk prey and survive in the wild. Now when I build or play rangers, I always prefer to use the optional replacements for class features like favorite enemy and natural explorer. I do this because I really don't like the way that the original rangers features are only useful in a few scenarios, where you're facing a specific enemy or you're in a specific place. As always, talk to your DM. If they don't allow these replacements, there will of course be character sheets in the description that don't use them. Most rangers focus on archery and range, but Armin's up-close and personal nature make him want to be right up in the face of the opponents he faces. For fighting style, Armin will want to take two-weapon fighting. The next big thing to worry about as a ranger is conclave. There are a lot of options here, but there is one obvious choice: Drake Warden. Drake Warden is a fairly new ranger subclass, but it's really cool and allows us to interact with Baz in some really awesome ways, like Baz empowering our attacks, and as we level up, Baz will get stronger too. If you actually read all the class features of Drake Warden, there are some really cool things that I think you'll really like. Lastly, let's talk about Armin's race. Honestly, you really could choose just about any race in D&D and it would work extremely well with the character, but in my imagination for the character when I first came up with him, I see Armin as a half-elf, more specifically of wood elf descent. Part 3. Ability scores. When talking about ability scores, the best way for me to go about giving you advice is to rate each of the stats from 1 to 6 based on how important they are to the character's success and story. If you roll for ability scores or use point buy or even an array system, this rating should help you choose where you put your best stats. Up first is dexterity. Dexterity is the most important stat for rangers, period. Sneaking, shooting a bow, using finesse weapons like rapier or scimitars are all things that Armin will be doing all the time. In his story, he is also known to be a free runner, dashing through trees, jumping from branch to branch. You should put your highest stat into dexterity. Next up is wisdom. Wisdom fuels a lot of the things that Armin does: spells, survival, animal handling, etc. Because of this, it should 100% be your second priority for Armin's stats. Now for third place, it is a tie between Constitution and Charisma. Armin has always been a charismatic person. He is confident and boastful, and because of that, it wouldn't make sense for him to dump Charisma as a stat. Constitution is also a very important stat for Armin. He's gonna be taking a few hits, and because he wants to get up close and personal in fights instead of staying behind, it might be a good idea to beef up his health pool a bit for when he inevitably takes some damage. Now, fifth place is another tie, this time between Strength and Intelligence. Neither of these stats are very important for Armin's story, so they can both be justified to be fairly low. Strength is mostly used for things like athletics or weapon attacks with non-finesse weapons, but since Armin will almost exclusively be using dex-based weapons, he should have no problem without a high strength stat. Intelligence is much the same. Certain things like investigation or nature checks would be nice to have high stats for, but there isn't really a good reason to prioritize intelligence over something like charisma or constitution. If you must dump a stat and you're going with point buy, my suggestion is strength. Part 4. Proficiencies and feats. Our second to last step to fully fleshing out Armin and Baz's character sheet is starting proficiencies and optional feats if you choose to take a feat instead of ability score increases at level 4. As a ranger, Armin gets to choose 3 proficiencies out of animal handling, athletics, insight, investigation, nature, perception, stealth, and survival. Out of these choices, the ones that fit Armin the best are going to be stealth, survival, and insight. All 3 of these skills are checks you will most likely be making very often, so it's a really good idea to take proficiency in them and get big bonuses. As a half-elf, Armin gets 2 free proficiencies in any skills that he wants. For this choice, I would choose perception and animal handling. They will both also be extremely useful for Armin in the long run. Now, when you create a character in D&D, you also choose a background, which will give you some extra proficiencies, but since there are so many options for backgrounds, it's best just to make my choices and allow you to read them on the character sheets in the description. At level 4, and at later levels, this character gets a choice between an ability score increase or a feat. Feats in D&D, as described by the player's handbook, represent a talent or an area of expertise that gives a character special capabilities. It embodies training, expertise, and abilities beyond what a class provides. These feats can have really powerful effects, so if your rolls are really high and you don't feel you need to increase your stats, feats can be a great idea, provided you know the right ones to use. For Armin, there are 2 main options. First is Defensive Duelist. Its ability to add to your AC can come in handy whenever you get attacked and they barely hit. Now, your second option for feats for Armin is going to be Dual Wielder. If you take this feat, I recommend investing some money on rapiers to get a good boost to your damage. Also, the AC bonus is always welcome. Part 5. Gear. As always happens when making a new character, there are some choices you need to make when it comes to starting gear. There are a few options Armin has to choose from as a ranger, the first of which Armin must choose between scale mail or leather armor. For this choice, he will pick leather armor. This is because Armin will likely use stealth skills, and the dex cap on his armor plus disadvantage to stealth is not a good combo for him. The second choice he has is 2 short swords or 2 simple melee weapons. For this choice, he will pick 2 short swords. The short sword is a finesse light weapon, so it can very easily be dual wielded. In my mind, though, I see Armin actually wielding scimitars, so consider investing some coins early on in those. Next, Armin has a choice of the Dungeoneer's Pack or an Explorer's Pack. For this choice, he will take the Explorer's Pack. Lastly, as a ranger, Armin automatically starts with a longbow and a quiver of 20 arrows. Later on down the line, look to invest in stronger weapons where possible, like the scimitar, as well as upgrading your armor to studded leather as soon as possible. There are no required magic items, but anything that could help with stealth, AC, and other things that Armin wants to do are always welcome and helpful. Alrighty, guildmates, that's all I have to say when it comes to building Armin Blackwright and Baz in D&D. As always, there will be character sheets from levels 1 to 5 using both the alternative class features and the original class features in the description below. Hopefully any other questions you have can be answered there, but if you comment down below, I will also try my best to answer any questions. Feel free to use Armin and Baz as NPCs, your own character, as villains, whatever floats your boat. For now, this meeting of the Lore Keepers Guild will be adjourned. Until the next time I see you all, be on the lookout for stories worth listening to, and send any you find to me in the comments below. I'm your Guildmaster, And until next time, remember, ad astra per fabulous.